This was how it all kicked off yesterday, with the BMWs going head-to-head off the grid. Frank Kekler versus Maxime Martin as they swooped through Eau Rouge for the first time. And it was Maxime Martin who came out ahead as the cars powered up towards Les Combes for the first time. Kekler ran second, Alvaro Parent was third. And this multi-million euro traffic jam headed uphill for the first time. Andre Lotterer busy in traffic as he tried to work his way past cars at the hairpin at La Source. He was on the tail of Ben Schneider as Uwe Altsson got himself onto the rear of the Lamborghini driven by Peter Cox. And the two of them ran nose to tail down towards the bus stop. Matt Griffin's brand new Ferrari, complete with broken bonnet caps, battled on but losing time in a straight line because of the lack of speed it had, while Xavier Marsan put a move on Olivier Pla and picked off another place, making his way up towards Les Combes. Frank Kekler was doing his best to stay in touch with the race leader, but he couldn't quite do it as the gap started to widen and Koen Wouters was given a shove. That put him off the road. Adam Christodoulou, though, was the first major talking point as he made this dive for the pit lane, misjudged it, glanced off Andre Lotterer and hit the Armco. It did a lot of damage to the suspension of the McLaren. It also did lots of damage to the suspension of the Audi. Eventually the McLaren, although it rejoined, would crash out. Christodoulou, though, excluded as a driver from the race. Frank Kekler had drama ahead of him as he turned his way into the bus stop as the Lorenz Frey-driven Jaguar was tipped into a spin, and Uwe Altsson, carving his way through traffic, made his move to get past the ARC Bratislava Porsche and Edward Sandstrom's Audi on the inside, going in towards Les Combes. The GT3 Racing Audi got turned into a spin. That was down at the right-hander of Bruxelles, Peter Belshaw being turned around, and some brave driving was going on as the battle between Sandstrom, Lemeray and Stippler took up attention. Frank Stippler eventually being able to work a way past with a really opportunistic move, gaining 2 places on the run up the hill going into Les Combes. The McLarens of Eric van der Poel and Alvaro Parent very nearly fell out as they tripped over themselves going through Les Combes, but the overtake happened when the cars got down to the pith path. Parent moving ahead of the winningest driver in the Spa 24. Oil out of the back of the 33 Porsche was on the road. Flames from the back of the Porsche meant it headed for the pit lane. Van der Poel and Cox were caught out by the slippery track. They spun as down the pit lane came Eric Dermont for the flames to be extinguished. When the rain came, it was really heavy and it caught out many a driver, including Julian Draper. His McLaren aquaplaned off the road, so too did the similar car of Phil Quaife. The yellow flags came out, the safety car came out. Its first of 15 appearances during the course of the race. There was so much standing water on the track, the Audi mechanics were thinking it was time to go swimming. Eventually, though, the conditions did indeed relent just a little, and the race was back underway. Up front, it was developing into a fight for leadership between the Audi of number 1, the Team WRT entry, the Maxime Martin-driven BMW, and the number 16 René Rast-driven Audi. The BMW was ahead but under pressure from the 2 Audis, and Rast was closing the gap to the pair. As the leading Mark VDS BMW made its pit stop, number 1 was getting closer, but with points awarded at the 6-hour mark, it was important that Marcus Paltelot, with a stop-go penalty hanging over him, was kept out of the car. At the 6-hour mark, this was the leading car, and maximum points at the 6-hour point of the race went the way of the BMW. Philippe Salini had this huge accident coming out of Blancpain. The weather conditions catching him out, the Porsche destroyed the driver okay. And then in the darkness, Christopher Hasse made this move for the race lead and worked his way through, up on the inside coming through the bus stop. With the rain falling again, the safety car was deployed once more. Everybody paddled their way around the circuit, tiptoeing through the puddles. But eventually the race would get back underway, and for the drivers it was an even bigger challenge than before, because this time around they didn't just have the standing water to worry about, there was some spray, but also a lack of light, a lack of visibility caused by that as well. The fireworks that were lit would help a little bit, but for the drivers it was still going to be a big problem, and the 1 or 2 who were really lucky in traffic with such a big entry of 66 cars, it was not going to be easy to work your way through. Frank Kekler, for example, glancing off the United Autosports Audi. He got away with it. Maxime Martin was lucky as well in the BMW not to come a cropper against the McLaren in the hands of Mike Wainwright, who misjudged where Poran was and turned across the front of the BMW and had a spin as a consequence. The 2 McLarens contrived to drive into each other. Klaus Hummel up the inside of Nico Verdonk. It was a big impact. It put both of them out of the race, and it took Verdonk out of the Pro-Am class lead. He was absolutely livid. Not unsurprisingly, as the number 16 Audi started to work its way into the mix for the race lead. And as the race wore on, it was getting closer and closer to the front, joining the number 3 BMW and the number 1 Team WRT Audi within that leading group. The concert in full swing attracted the attention of the fans, and at 4:37 in the morning, Marcus Paltela had his stop-go penalty to serve. It was followed by a puncture. Also, the car was hit from behind and suffered some rear damage. Andrea Piccini at 9:10 this morning also had a problem. He was leading, he had a puncture. The car headed for the pit lane, and it seemed as though maybe 16 was infallible after all. Number 1 picked up the race lead, but it too would have problems. A wheel was shed by the 89 Aston Martin. 74 Porsche bounced off it, the wheel in turn clobbering the concrete. Hans-Guido Riegel was busy at the wheel of his Porsche. Big sideways moment coming into the bus stop, but he was able to power his way out again, as trouble for the number 3 BMW meant that they couldn't restart the car easily after pit stops. And then a wheel came loose on the 71 Ferrari, and Daniel Zampieri ploughed off the road. The car came to a halt. The wheel eventually rejoined the whole ensemble, as down in the pit lane the Lamborghini was having problems and electrical drama, meaning that it was struggling with the gear shift. Tom Christensen got rid of his rather now futile loose interior mirror, just used the door mirror and carried on battling his way into 6th place. That was under the safety car. When that pulled off, the race was back underway and the leader was held up in traffic. Audi number 1 being given a hard time by the charging Frank Stippler. He was right on his tail as the cars worked their way up towards Les Combes. 16 led the way, and Christopher Hasser had this moment under braking for Les Combes. He scooped it all up again and was able to press on, try to reduce that deficit to the leading car, and this was how it looked on board. Hasser off the road, over the curb, back on again. But Stippler was building the lead despite this big sideways moment as he really pushed hard. Maxime Martin unlapped himself from Frank Stippler, but wasn't terribly pleased with the way that he'd been held up by the leader. Why didn't you let me unlap you myself, was the question from Maxime Martin. A spin for Jan Brunstedt put his Audi backwards off the road, and the Mark VDS team was awoken from its slumbers by the arrival of the cameras. Twan Hesemans concentrating on how his son's car was doing. 15th in the end was the answer. A spin for Christopher Mies coming out of the bus stop, and as he rejoined, he went a lap down to number 16. Then number 2 ended up in its garage. There was an issue with the seat belts, and 2 laps later, Edward Sandstrom had even bigger problems as he clipped the curb and lost control of the car. It was a mighty impact into the tyres. The car was going no further. Sandstrom was okay, the car out of the race on the spot, and yet again, the safety car was deployed. Everybody formed up behind the safety car. The track was cleared, and the leading Audi had a pad change and went back into the race. But even though the pad change was done in double quick time, it was then held at a red light and lost ground once again to the number 1 Audi. He overtook the car back on track though, as Stippler and Hasser continued to trade the lead. 52 was on target for the Pro-Am class honours, and running strongly in 3rd place was the number 66 V41 BMW. The lead battle was as intense as ever, as Stippler made his move up on the inside, diving down to the bus stop, and that put him once again back in front. Then Lorenzo Bontempelli had this enormous accident coming out of Blancpain, the car hitting the tyres and rolling. He was okay, but it brought out the safety car for the 16th time, and therefore the leader served its last pit stop. Stefano Ortelli had a last-minute decision to pit, having turned his way through the bus stop. Oh no, I don't. Swing right and come in. He crossed the white line, however, that you're not meant to do, and a drive-through penalty went his way, and that meant that the car fell away, lost a lap to the race leader. Maxi Jazz was enjoying the last part of the race. Mark Hayek wasn't, as his smoky Lamborghini was starting to wilt. But for AF Corsa, the number 52 Ferrari was looking good for a class win. First Motorsports Porsche was looking good for victory within the Gentleman Trophy, and at the checkered flag, the Audi formation finish came through with Frank Stippler, Andrea Piccini and René Rast, Audi R8 LMS Ultra, winning the Spa 24 Hours. Second place to the Audi of Stefan Ortelli, Christopher Mies and Christopher Hasser, with 3rd to Frank Kekler, Greg Franchi and Matthias Lauda. And there were tales of woe and hardship and struggle and endeavour right the way to the checkered flag. The 64th running of the total 24 Hours of Spa has been another enthralling race. From David Addison and from Hayley Coxon at Spa, for now, it's goodbye.